In this lesson we will talk about the law of cosines, and there's also a couple area formulas we'll go over. So we saw yesterday how side-side angle would use law of sines, and if we had side angle side we'd have to use law of cosines, or we couldn't use law of sines. So to memorize the law of cosines, here's a way that I like. Based on whatever angle you have or are trying to find, everything else will be named based on that. So here's theta, and this would be an opposite side, and we'll have two adjacent sides, and this will be called the opposite angle. So the law of cosines is just going to be the opposite side squared and then we're going to have adjacent minus 2 adjacent, and then opposite angle. So if you have trouble memorizing the formula or the law, you can just memorize this pattern where all of these are adjacents. These are squared. And then here we have an opposite side. At the other opposite end, we have the opposite angle. Oh, forgot something. That's cosine of the opposite angle. So adjacent squared plus adjacent squared minus 2 times adjacent times the cosine of the opposite angle. And one more rule. When you're solving a triangle, if you have a choice to find two angles, you want to find you find a smaller angular side with law of sines. Find the larger angle or side with law of cosines. And this is a side angle side. We can't use law of sines because we don't know a pair of opposites. So we're going to do law of cosines. And we also don't have a choice of what to find first. We have to find x first because we have to have the adjacent, and the opposite angle. Let's find side x first. So we have opposite side squared equals the adjacent squared plus the other adjacent squared minus 2 adjacent cosine 40. So that is going to be 100 plus 225 is 325. This is going to be 30 times 10 is 300. Instead of squaring, let's square root. So I hope you saw the mistake. This is a common mistake where students will combine the subtraction before doing multiplication. So that's not following the order of operations rules. We cannot combine these. So this is incorrect. Don't do that. And we just have to enter this into the calculator and we'll get 9.756. Alright, let's find, now with law of sines, let's find the smaller angle. So looking at this, if this is a 9, and we are trying to find an angle. Y is opposite of 15, Z is opposite of 10. That means Z must be a smaller angle than Y, because Y has the larger opposite side. So now we're going to do law of sines, but that means make sure we use law of sines on Z, not on Y, because we want to use, if we're going to use law of sines, make sure you find a small angle or side. So let's find Z. Sine Z over 10 equals sine 40 over 9.756. We're going to multiply by 10. And then we have to do inverse sine. Now we know two angles, so we can just subtract them from 180 to find angle Y, and that'll be 180 minus 41.213 minus 40. And we solve the triangle. Alright, another side angle side. That means we have to use law of cosines. You can't do law of sines because we don't know, we don't have a pair of angle and side. So pause the video and try that one. We have to find R first. So there's the opposite side. We have opposite side squared is adjacent plus adjacent, adjacent squared plus adjacent squared, 2 times adjacent, cosine 123. So 169 plus 25 minus 10 times 13, 130, cosine 123. We want a square root. So now we have a pair of opposite angle and side. We can now use law of sines. We can find Q or we can find T. We want to make sure we find this small angle first. So since 5 is opposite of Q, we know Q is smaller than T. So let's find Q. sine q over 5 is sine 123 over r So we multiply both sides by 5. Now it goes 5 sine 123. Then we want to cancel the sine with inverse sine. So doing this on the calculator, we get and we know two angles, so now we can find the third angle. Angle T is 180 minus the other two angles. Here is the other case that requires the law of cosines. Um, we don't know opposite angle inside. We don't know any angles, so we can't do law of sines. And now we have the choice which angle to find first. Since we're using law of cosines, make sure that we find the largest angle first. So the largest side is opposite of the largest angle. That means we need to find A first, angle A. Let's find the largest angle first, and we're going to do law of cosines. We're trying to find A, so that's the opposite side is 6. The adjacent plus the adjacent, 2 times the adjacent, cosine of A. So we cannot combine all of these. We can combine this, but not the 40. So we need to get A by itself. That means we're going to go minus 16 minus 25. And divide by negative 40. So we subtract 16, subtract 25, divide by negative 40. And then we have inverse cosine of both sides. And we get 82.819. Okay, now if we use law of, we need to find C and B. Let's use law of sines to find the smaller angle. In this case, either one would work, but let's just stick to the rule. And if 4 is the smallest side, then B is the smallest angle. Let's find B first. Sine B over side B equals sine A over side A. We're going to multiply by 4. Multiply by 4 and do inverse sine. And now we know two angles. So angle C is just going to be angle C. We have 180 minus 41.41 minus 82.819, and we get 55.771. Pause the video and try that one. We have to use law of cosines, and we need to find the largest angle first. So here's the largest side, and that means we have to find E first. So if we're looking at E, then 14 is the opposite side, and to find angle E, opposite side squared, adjacent squared, minus 2 adjacent cosine of E. And we don't have to, we're going to use the calculator, we don't have to simplify anything. We can just have 14 squared minus 10 squared minus 13 squared. Subtract this, subtract that, and divide by this. Then we can just do inverse cosine of both sides. Oh, and depending on which calculator you're using, if you type this the wrong way, you get the wrong answer. So make sure you put parentheses in the numerator and parentheses in the denominator. And we get 73,694. So we know angle E, and to be safe, let's find the smallest angle. So here we know angle E. We're looking for D or F. F is smaller because it's opposite of 10, so let's do sine law for F. Sine F over 10 is multiplied by 10 and inverse sine. The third angle D is just going to be 180 minus the other two angles. And we get 63.027. And let's look at the area formulas. So we have a right triangle. the area is 1/2 base times height. If we don't have a right triangle, we just have to find the height. So the base is 5, and we just have to find the height. We had to find the height for law of sines, so we know that the height, sine 30 is h over 4. So h equals 4 times sine 30. Then we do area is 1/2 base times the height. And that this is presented as a formula in most books, and you can just memorize it as 1/2 adjacent times the sine of the angle. So this is used for side angle side. If you have side angle side, you can do 1/2 adjacent times the sine of 30 degrees. So if we had a triangle, L is 67, J is 11, K is 24. Since we have side angle side, we can just do the formula we created. The area is 1/2 adjacent times the sine of the angle. So draw that triangle and find the area. Pause the video. X is 16, Z is 18, side angle side, so we can use the formula for area is 1/2 adjacent times sine 124. So that's what we can use for side angle side triangles. Now we'll look at a formula for side triangles. And this is called Heron's formula. If we have a side triangle, we have to find half of the perimeter, and that's add up the sides and divide by 2. That is the semi-perimeter, half of the perimeter. And then the area is this value, S times S minus A, S minus B, S minus C. So if we have a triangle with these dimensions, finding the area requires Heron's formula, and we'll have x, y, z. Side z is 27, side x is 29, side y is 25. We find the semi-perimeter, 25 plus 29 plus 27 over 2, 40.5. And then we just use that formula. Area is square root 40.5, 40.5 minus 25, 40.5 minus 29, 40.5 minus 27. And that's approximately 312.2 square inches. Here we have miles. G 77 miles. So you use Heron's formula to find the area of this triangle. Semi-perimeter is half of the perimeter, and we get 146. The area is 146, 146 minus 77, 146 minus 133, 146 minus 82. And in the calculator we get this, square miles. And that's it for this lesson.